I see it's 1:30.
Madam Chair, would you like to give a few more minutes for people to join us, or?
I'm checking to see who I see on the screen. I think we're getting close. I think we're good. Okay. I think we can get started now. It is 1:31 and welcome everyone. It's great to see you all again. Let's call the meeting to order. Tiffany, can we do roll call, please?
Sure, Madam Chair, my pleasure to take roll call. Chair Valerie Clark.
Present.
Yeah, Vice Chair Jonathan Johnson.
Here.
Miss Lavon Lewis. I believe she was going to be absent today, so not hearing anything, marking her as absent. Dr. Sarah Friedman.
Present.
Thank you. And Mr. Quincy Branch. Marking him as absent. Ms. Amber Torres. Currently hearing anything, go ahead and mark her as absent for now. Mr. Siam Kumar. And not hearing anything, so also mark him as absent. And Stacy Weeks. Not hearing anything, I'll mark her as absent. And I believe we do have a second designee for her, Todd Rich.
I see him on the screen.
I do see him, yes.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. I believe Stacy will be on, but in the interim, I'm here in her stead. Thank you.
Thank you for confirming. Commissioner Scott Kipper.
Here.
Thank you. And Jenny Helton. Excellent, thank you. And Madam Chair, that does complete our roll call at this time. I will ask and see if Amber Torres, if she has joined us. I'm looking at those who are joining us at the present too. We have people continuing to join us. Amber Torres, are you present? I'm still not hearing anything. So Madam Chair, we have 3 voting members who have joined us today. That is less than a quorum currently.
Well, myself, Jonathan, Sarah.
And that's it for voting members.
Oh, okay, you're right. Okay. So we do not have a quorum. So next steps would be to either Radhika, should we even have any public comment or anything, or should we just immediately reschedule the meeting?
You can go through the discussion items if you wish, have a public comment and go through the discussion items if you wish. However, you can, because we do not have a quorum, I believe you cannot go through the voting process or any action. The action items should be either pushed to another meeting or rescheduled for a call another meeting to take action on those items.
Okay. So why don't we have at least public comment and the non-action items, so that, because I believe we do have some important things that we need to hear about, but we will refrain from doing any of the voting items. So let's go ahead and do public comment next.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Radhika.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tiffany Davis, for the record, I'm happy to help facilitate the public comments. And I'd like to remind those that have joined us online that if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your electronic hand feature or indicate in our chat box that you would like to make a public comment, and our staff will let you know when you may unmute yourself. For those who've called into our meeting, we'll let you know when you may unmute yourself so that you may provide your public comment. And I'll go ahead and start with our Carson City Conference Room. Cassie, do we have anybody in our physical location there that would like to make a public comment?
This is Cassie Fuentes for the record. There is no public comment here in the Carson City office.
Thank you for confirming that, Cassie. And then online, once again, if we have any attendees who would like to provide public comment, you may at this time raise your electronic hand feature on Zoom, and we will call your name and you may unmute yourself for public comment. And I will refer to Caitlin. Caitlin, do you see anybody online that would like to make a public comment?
Hi, Caitlin Flagan for the record. No, I'm not seeing any hands raised or anything in the chat box at this time.
Thank you for confirming. On the phone lines, if anybody has joined us on the phone lines who would like to make a public comment, you may at this time go ahead and mute yourself and provide your public comment. Not hearing anything, Madam Chair, I would say at this point, we do not have any public comment.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. So we will skip item number 3, which is the approval of the minutes, and go straight to item number 4, which is the executive director report. And I will turn it over to Russell Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I will begin my executive report presently. I did want to check and see, given the audio problems that we've had in the past, are you able to hear me? Okay, Madam Chair, I want to make sure I'm coming through loud and clear.
Yeah, I can hear fine.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I will start with general comments. In the 2-month interim since the October board meeting, the exchange has been primarily focused on ensuring a successful open enrollment period for plan year 2025. Our communications team maintained a busy schedule of media and public event appearances throughout October and November. And our quality assurance team has worked closely with call center vendor Get Insured to ensure that the needs of consumers and enrollment professionals are being met. Additional details on the exchange's recent OEP activities are provided in the Open Enrollment 2025 section of this report. And given the comprehensive amount of detail that's in the balance of the report, I kept the general comment short and sweet this time. We have agendized each section of the report here so that I can pause after each section and address any questions or comments that the board might have. So I did want to pause, see if there are any comments thus far. All right, I did not anticipate any, but we'll get into the meat of the report shortly here. The next section is the 4-month look ahead. There are a variety of sections within the 4-month look ahead, starting with the conclusion of the plan year 2025 open enrollment period, which will be happening in January. So applications for coverage under the plan year 2025 open enrollment period, or OEP, must be submitted by midnight on January 15th of 2025. Excuse me, just a moment. Sorry, I've been finding some illness over the last couple of days. So the applications must be submitted by midnight on January 15th. However, consumers will have an additional 6 days through Tuesday, January 21st to submit their plan selections and secure coverage beginning on February 2nd of 2025. Building on last year's messaging efforts, the exchange will send effectuation reminders throughout the month of January to consumers whose 2025 enrollments remain in a pending or non-effectuated status. In addition to email reminders, the exchange will be sending effectuation reminders via SMS messaging for the first time in light of our successful use of SMS messaging for Nevadans impacted by the unwinding of the public health emergency. Following the conclusion of the plan year 2025 OEP, the special enrollment period, or SEP, for 2025 will begin on January 16th and continue through October 31st of 2025. The next update in the look ahead is in regard to the 2025 legislative session. The 2025 biennial legislative session will begin on February 3rd, 2025. In addition to defending its agency budget for the upcoming state fiscal year 2026 and 2027 biennium, the exchange's top priority for the session will be the identification and subsequent tracking of proposed legislation which might have a fiscal or operational impact on the exchange. At this time, the exchange anticipates at least one bill draft request, or BDR, which will be of interest. On August 12th of 2024, the Nevada Legislature's Joint Interim Standing Committee on Health and Human Services voted in favor of introducing a BDR in the upcoming 2025 legislative session, which, if approved and signed into law, would require the exchange to, quote, seek a waiver to section 1312, chapter F, section 3 of the Affordable Care Act to the extent it would otherwise require excluding certain Nevada residents from enrolling in qualified dental and health plans of the state's exchange section. Additional details can be found in the work session documents of the August 12th meeting, and I did include a link to that meeting in my report here. Specifically, agenda item 5, recommendation number 2. And in practical terms, the BDR is intended in part to extend QHP or QDP eligibility to certain categories of undocumented immigrants, which would require the configurable modification of the exchange's lawful presence verification functionality. An update on the exchange's bill tracking efforts will be provided during the February 18th, 2025 board meeting. The next section in the look ahead is related to DACA eligibility changes. During the October 15th board meeting, my executive director's report described a CMS rule change which expanded the definition of lawfully present to include DACA recipients, thereby allowing these individuals to enroll in ACA coverage beginning December 1st, 2024. Earlier this fall, the Nevada HealthLink Marketplace was updated to ensure that DACA recipients would be granted lawfully present status beginning on November 1st. In October, we also reported that a group of 19 state attorneys general filed a lawsuit in federal district court in North Dakota, seeking an injunction to block the implementation of this rule. On December 9th, Judge Daniel Traynor of the U.S. District Court in North Dakota ruled that DACA recipients in the 19 plaintiff states would be barred from enrolling in ACA coverage. At this time, DACA recipients in Nevada remain eligible to enroll. However, the exchange will continue to closely monitor any legal or executive developments related to eligibility for DACA recipients. The next item in the 4-month look ahead is related to Equifax's Verify Current Income service. As we first reported in the June 18th, 2024 Executive Director's Report, a CMS rule change promulgated earlier this year required state-based exchanges to begin paying for the use of Equifax's Verify Current Income or VCI data service, which is used to verify the income of Nevada HealthLink applicants who are seeking financial assistance. This rule took effect on July 1st, 2024. For context, state-based exchanges are required to verify household income using the IRS's Income and Family Size, or IFSV service, but use of the VCI service is optional, and the Nevada HealthLink system is configured to use VCI as a fallback verification service in the event that household income cannot be verified through the IRS. Without a fallback verification service in place, households whose income cannot be verified through the IRS alone would be required to upload supporting documentation to verify their subsidy eligibility, which places a burden on consumers and exchange resources alike. Failure to upload the required documentation is also a leading contributor to loss of subsidy eligibility and eventually to cancellation or termination for non-payment of premiums. The practical value of the VCI service, then, is to minimize the administrative burden associated with manual income verification, as well as the associated risk of disenrollment. But at nearly $6 per household, the cost of the VCI service is significant. Given the extremely short runway provided by the CMS rule change, it was not practical for the exchange to discontinue its use of the VCI service by the July 1st deadline. Instead, our strategy was to continue utilizing VCI throughout the plan year 2025 open enrollment period, after which the exchange would assess the value that the VCI service provided to Nevada HealthLink consumers. In simplest terms, we want to quantify the average cost for each household whose income could not be verified through the IRS, but whose income could be verified using VCI. The exchange is currently in the process of developing the required reporting, and we intend to present the results of this analysis to the board in February, with the goal of allowing the board to consider and potentially vote on the continued use of the VCI service. I'll move on to an update on carrier premium fees. In February of each year, the exchange presents its recommendations to the board regarding potential adjustments to the monthly carrier premium fee, or CPF, which is the percentage of monthly gross premiums assessed to each of the exchange's insurance carriers. The CPF is the exchange's sole source of operating revenue. In February of 2024, the exchange recommended that the CPI be reduced from 3.05% to 2.95% of gross premiums, citing healthy reserve levels and an optimistic enrollment outlook for plan year 2024. The exchange will be performing a similar analysis for presentation at the February 18, 2025 board meeting. However, this year's recommendation might be contingent upon the continued use of the VCI service as described in the previous section. In such a case, the agenda for the February board meeting will be structured to allow the board to consider the continued use of the VCI service before considering the exchange's recommendations for the CPF. And the last update in the form of look ahead is related to the recent LCB and IRS audits. During the October board meeting, the exchange reported on the recent completion of 2 information security audits conducted by the IRS and Nevada's Legislative Counsel Bureau, or LCB. The results of the LCB audit are now publicly available on LCB's website at this link, and again, I included a link in the report. But I believe the most telling bit of information in the document is contained on the first page. And I'm reading a quote from the document here. While we noted various opportunities for improvement, our work did not identify any critical security vulnerabilities at the exchange within our testing areas. A summary of their most significant findings follows. And I'll just read down the list of these findings here. The first is that user access requests lack consistency and documentation with respect to agents, brokers, and navigators, for whom an explicit access request form has not previously been required. The exchange has implemented this requirement going forward, so we will be requiring explicit access requests going forward. Security training for agency personnel lacks oversight, and the exchange has addressed this control by implementing a state-sponsored training framework known as NOVA 4. This is an online training, privacy and security training framework, which logs the results of employee participation. Next is routine user access reviews were not being documented. The exchange has addressed this finding by implementing and documenting quarterly user access reviews. The next finding is that internal risk assessments were not being conducted. Now, for reference, the exchange does conduct an annual information security risk assessment as required by CMS regulations. However, agency workstations and network infrastructure have not historically been included in this process, and that's simply because they're not required by federal regulations. But the exchange has addressed this finding by implementing automated network vulnerability scanning, and agency hardware will be included in our risk assessments going forward. The next finding is in relation to our asset inventory process, which involves tracking our IT assets, workstations, laptops, etc. This was noted as requiring improvement. The exchange has addressed this finding by updating its asset inventory to accurately reflect our workstation and laptop holdings. So we're all synced up now. And then also wanted to mention their finding that the security room, the server room security rather, should be enhanced. We do have a room in our Carson City office location that contains some network hardware, as well as a file server that we maintain on premises. So we are currently working to obtain bids for a metal door to replace the wooden door in order to increase the security of our on-premises server. Now, moving on, the IRS's findings overlap substantially with LCB's findings. And although they remain confidential, they did add some findings that were specific to IRS regulations, including the need to add IRS Exhibit 7 contract language to our vendor contract with Get Insured. So the exchange is currently working on a contract amendment to address this deficiency rather. The IRS also noted physical security deficiencies, including the lack of a written policy prohibiting tailgating or piggybacking with respect to foot traffic through the main entrances of the exchange's office location. Tailgating would just be, one person walking in right after another person who's used their key card to open the door. The vast majority of the IRS's findings have been addressed or will be addressed in the near future by the modification of existing policy and procedure or contractual documentation. And as with the LCB audit, no critical findings were identified by the IRS. And I mentioned a moment ago that the IRS findings are still confidential. I don't believe we've shared any compromising information in this report, but I mentioned that specifically because we cannot provide at this time a link to the complete report that was delivered by the IRS. So that concludes the formal look ahead. At this time, I will pause for questions or comments from the board. All right.
Russell, I just have a quick
yeah,
question.
Yes.
I didn't, so what you just, the findings that you just went through, did you put those in the report that's online, or do we have those?
Those were actually sourced from the report that was online. So what I just read through represents about 2/3 or so the findings that were included in the LCB report. There were other findings that I did not mention. I did not include them in this report for brevity and because the findings that I did not include we considered to be of less severity than the findings that we did include. But the link in my executive director's report will take you directly to the complete document, which includes all of LCB's findings along with their recommendations.
Okay, and that is on the website?
That's hosted on the legislature's website, yeah, the LCB website in particular. So that's a publicly available document at this time.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have a couple of questions. One is about the VCI service fee. Is that something that is paid on all households for all participants in the exchange, or just those that cannot be verified by the IRS?
Great question. Generally speaking, it's the latter. We will attempt to verify income through the IRS. If we are either unable to verify the income, meaning that the consumer attested income is outside of what's known as the compatibility threshold, so it differs by I think more than 50% of what the IRS is returning, or if the IRS either returns no data or an error response indicating a technical error on their end, that's when the VCI service will be invoked as a fallback.
And perhaps in our February board meeting, when we revisit that aspect, we can get an idea in terms of like the occurrence rate for using that VCI service and what the cost impact is to that. That'd be helpful to know. And then the other question, I'm assuming since Nevada was not one of the, was it 14 or 19 states that filed the injunction on the DACA eligibility changes, what does that mean for Nevada? Is there something that we have to do or don't have to do? What's the status of that?
Great question, and this is literally changing on almost a daily basis lately following the December 9th ruling. But the short answer is at this time, no action, no changes are required on the part of the exchange. The rule that was implemented earlier this year by CMS, which extended ACA eligibility to DACA recipients, remains in effect in Nevada, and the changes that we implemented earlier in the fall in order to allow for DACA eligibility, that functionality remains in effect in our system. We do, for reference, have the ability to roll that functionality back on short notice. So we've had this continuously in mind, when we developed this functionality with Get Insured. So if there is a rule change impacting Nevada, and if we are no longer allowed to grant eligibility to DACA recipients, we can revert to the previous functionality, which would deny eligibility to DACA recipients. So at this time, no changes are required, but we are awaiting, federal guidance, and we will have the ability to sense and adjust accordingly.
Okay. And so the question again, this is helpful for me, but are we allowed to extend it or required to extend it presently?
DACA eligibility?
Yeah.
We are. It's a federal rule, and within the framework of the exchange's regulations that govern our operations, we are required to extend DACA eligibility at present. So that's a federal rule. To be perfectly frank, I'm not certain how exactly the ruling that impacted the 19 plaintiff states was architected because that would seem to be a state-specific prohibition in relation to a federal rule. But we've clarified with CMS recently, following that ruling, that we are required to continue extending DACA eligibility in Nevada for the time being.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I just want to confirm also that, with regard to your comments or questions about the VCI service, that was precisely the intent of the analysis that we're working on right now. We wanted to provide, actual numbers, dollars and cents, numbers of households, both households that benefited from VCI, as well as households where VCI might have been utilized but didn't actually end up, verifying the income of that household. We want to provide an accurate breakdown of all aspects of the benefits or lack thereof that VCI is providing in February. So it sounds like we're very much aligned with your comments.
Perfect.
All right. Hearing no other questions, I will proceed to some good news. The next section is about open enrollment for 2025. Following the close of week 7, the plan year 2025 OEP is the exchange's highest performing to date. The annual passive renewals or auto renewals job was completed in mid-October with a greater than 99.9% renewal success rate. That is a record. When OEP began on November 1st, there were 91,555 individuals enrolled in 2025 health coverage, and 16,820 individuals were enrolled in dental coverage, our highest starting numbers ever. Since November 1st, enrollments have increased steadily. As of December 13th, 99,700 Nevadans were actively enrolled in health coverage for 2025. And I just got word yesterday from our data analysis that we are over 100,000 now. Already, though, this figure exceeds 2024's end of OEP total of 99,312 health enrollees. And if the current trajectory continues, then 2025 could see a record-setting number of marketplace enrollments in Nevada. And I did include a chart in my report, which I'll share on the screen momentarily. And this chart illustrates the weekly pace of OEP enrollments for the last 4 plan years. So I think it provides a really good illustration of kind of the year-over-year comparison here. So hopefully you all can see that. Please let me know if there's anyone who cannot see that. But the topmost line, which is kind of a gold color, represents 2025. The next line below it, the blue line, represents 2022. Some of the board members may recall that 2022 was our previous high watermark in terms of enrollments at the end of OEP. The final count in 2022 was 101,411. The next line is the pink line, which is the current year, 2024. We finished with 99,312. And in 2023, which was the lowest of the last several years, we ended with 96,379 health enrollees. And all these numbers, I should clarify, are health enrollees. Dental enrollees are counted separately. So as you can see from the trend line here, we've been hovering on a week-over-week basis at about a consistent level of 10,000 more health enrollees for any given week of open enrollment versus that record-setting year of 2022. The number of new enrollees that we're seeing on a week-over-week basis is actually comparable to 2022. I would attribute most of these, the gains for this year's open enrollment, I should say, for 2025, to our high starting number. You can see that we started with nearly 91,500 enrollees on November 1st versus 87,347 for 2022. All right, so moving on. As with prior years, the exchange is offering extended call center hours during OEP. Based upon a review of historical call volumes, though, we made the decision to discontinue offering Sunday hours. This allowed the exchange to achieve a substantial cost savings versus the extended call center hours for plan year 2024's OEP, while still exceeding target service levels for average wait and handle times. And for reference, average wait times have been hovering in the 5-second region or less. Customer satisfaction, as measured by post-call surveys, has averaged 92% since OEP began on November 1st. which includes calls handled during non-business hours by the Amelia automated virtual assistant. A post-OEP summary report, as well as any relevant analysis regarding demographics and consumer behavior, will be provided during the February 18th, 2025 board meeting. So we're still in the midst of OEP, but things are looking pretty good so far. I would be happy to address any comments or questions by the board regarding OEP. All right, hearing no comments or questions, I'm going to move on to a brief update regarding our agency budget. At the time of this report's preparation, the governor's recommended budget for state fiscal years 2026 and 2027 has not been officially released. But as we reported during the October board meeting, the exchange's agency request budget reflected an average increase of 8.3% versus the current biennium, which included the new costs associated with Equifax's VCI income verification service that will, of course, be contingent upon its continued use in the upcoming biennium, as well as 2 new staff positions that we requested. The first of these requested positions is a plan certification supervisor, which the exchange hopes will address the steadily increasing plan certification workload associated with the growing number of insurance carriers offering plans for sale through the Nevada Health Inc. marketplace. We believe this position will also be essential for ensuring the successful rollout of the market stabilization program and the associated ballot-borne state plans next fall. The second requested position is a full-time tribal liaison, which we believe will be essential to ensuring the growth and continued success of the exchange's tribal partnership program. Based on recent meetings with the governor's finance office, the exchange remains optimistic that these positions will be forwarded for legislative review as part of the governor's recommended budget. Further details regarding the final status of the governor's recommended budget will be provided during the February 18th, 2025 board meeting. So again, as with OEP, it's kind of a work in progress, but we wanted to provide you with what we thought were the most relevant updates. I will, again, be happy to address any comments or questions from the board.
Okay.
All right, moving right along here. Next, I wanted to provide an update on the RFP for technology platform and call center services. Due to administrative delays encountered in late October and early November, the exchange was unable to deliver the proposed RFP for technology platform and call center services to the state purchasing agency until November 26th. As of the writing of this report, the RFP remains under review from state purchasing and the exchange's deputy attorney general. I acknowledge that the schedule represents a substantial delay relative to the timeline that was proposed in the executive director's report from our October board meeting, and I'd like to provide the board with some insight into the impediments that we encountered in the meantime. To provide the appropriate context, the exchange is required to maintain a status known as the Authority to Connect, or ATC, to the Federal Data Services Hub, which is the source of the electronic data services that the Nevada Health Link Marketplace uses to verify the eligibility of its enrollees. ATC status is granted in 3-year increments, and the exchange's current ATC is set to expire on September 13th of 2025. In order to renew its ATC status, the exchange is required to solicit a third-party agency to perform an independent security assessment, which involves the review and testing of the privacy and security controls implemented by the Marketplace technology platform. Based upon previous discussions with the exchange's information security liaisons at CMS, with whom the exchange meets on a monthly basis to ensure ongoing ATC compliance, it was our understanding that if the RFP resulted in a vendor change, an independent security assessment would only be required for the new technology platform. It was also our understanding that the ATC for the new technology platform would not be required until verification services were needed to facilitate passive renewals in late October, and the proposed project schedule was structured accordingly. But during our recent meeting with CMS, which included senior information security personnel who did not attend the monthly meetings, the exchange was informed that in the event of a vendor change, independent security assessments would be required for both technology platforms, and that the ATC for both systems must be in place by September 13th of 2025. Given the numerous dependencies associated with the RFP's proposed transition plan, this change required significant modifications to the project schedule and deliverables to ensure CMS compliance. As a result of this correspondence with CMS, the exchange learned that no other state-based marketplace has yet faced the possibility of a vendor transition. As with the exchange's transition away from the healthcare.gov platform in 2019, we once again find ourselves in the position of having to develop a playbook for an unprecedented contingency. Based on the impact of these delays on the timeline for solicitation, state purchasing has expressed concerns about the risk of not meeting the required implementation deadline. To ensure that continued services remain available to Nevada Health and consumers, state purchasing is recommending a temporary contract extension with existing vendor Get Insured in order to allow for a lengthier procurement timeline. The exchange is in favor of this contingency, and we intend to work with state purchasing in the coming weeks to develop a proposed contract extension, which will be presented to the board for review and approval during the February 18th, 2025 board meeting. And I do realize this is a big curveball. A lot of this just came together in the last few days, but we do have Gideon Davis, who is the state purchasing administrator, joined us on the call today to address any questions or concerns that the board might have or answer any questions that might have been raised by this update.
So I know this is a big topic for some. I know my question is Get Insured in the boat with you? Do they understand what's happening? Do they have they expressed that they were willing to extend their?
I have reached out to Get Insured today, actually, because again, this is literally in light of an email that I received this morning from state purchasing. And I've spoken with our contact at Get Insured and proposed the idea. He indicated that he would run it up the flagpole essentially and get back to me by tomorrow. So we don't yet have this solidified with Get Insured, but we have already begun to have those discussions.
Does anyone else have any questions? So if Gideon, there he is, I see his name. Mr. Davis, so you weren't the one in our prior board meeting.
No. Hi, I'm Gideon Davis. I'm the administrator of the state purchasing division, for the record. No, Ryan Vradenberg, who is my senior purchasing officer, was the one who attended your last meeting. But actually, I was the person who ran the solicitation 5 years ago that led to the award to Get Insured. So I do have some unique experience related to this project.
Okay. So I admit this is the language that you guys use is a little bit over my head. So I might, if I ask a dumb question, bear with me. But I thought there was a major sense of urgency with either state purchasing or someone that this had to go out right away. And now we don't have that sense of urgency anymore. And now we're okay extending the contract, which is what we had asked for in the last board meeting. So I guess I'm just a little bit lost, to be completely honest. I'm just a little bit lost as to where this whole thing stands. And if we're asking for an extension, how long of an extension are we asking for?
So I understand your confusion there. Again, Gideon Davis, state purchasing, because circumstances changed. And so we had to react. And that's basically the simple answer to the question. The more complicated answer is last board meeting, we believed we did have enough time. As Russell explained, there was some complicating factors with CMS, but there was also just normal kind of delays that happen sometimes because government doesn't always move as quickly as we hope. And that led to, we are in a different situation now, 2 months later than we were then. And as a result of that, there are concerns that we cannot succeed in the way that we thought we could 2 months ago. And the thing that is unique about the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange that is different for other contracts is you have to operate on the program year. And so, whereas like a DPBH contract for their electronic health record system, right? If we had a delay in a procurement, we would be able to potentially delay that implementation by a month or two and then still be able to operate fine, right?
Sure.
But the timeline we were looking at to award a contract in April, have an implementation, and have the vendor potentially ready for open enrollment by October and November is a pretty tight timeline. And
Right.
so if we miss that, we are in a worse position 3 or 4 months from now than we are right now. And so it benefits the state to consider that now,
Yeah.
even if it is potentially premature, because we recognize that there are steps in this process, like getting an amendment approved by BOE that have fixed amount of time that they will take, right? And so even to amend this contract, to bring that potential amendment back to the board before taking it to BOE for approval, you're looking at that amendment going to probably April BOE, right? And so the idea that you could complete an entire RFP in the same time that we will need just to do an amendment to the existing contract is a little bit, fantastical, I guess.
At least we're
And so-
recognizing it now versus later.
So we have a choice where we can either run an RFP now that is quicker and sloppier than we would like it to be in order to get it done on the original timeline we proposed, or the state can choose to do what we don't really like to do, which is extend the contract beyond what we originally said 5 years ago it was going to be, right? Because what we are tied to is what we tell vendors. And so in the original solicitation for this contract, I believe we said, and Russell will correct me if I'm wrong here, we said a 4-year contract with the option to extend for 1 year. And we are in that 1-year option now. And so extending beyond that is not in line with what we originally intended to do 5 years ago. And that was the kind of, push that we were trying to stay in line with what we originally intended. But
Sure.
because of the circumstances that exist here in our now reality, we have to live with that, and we have to recognize that ensuring that service continues for the exchange is tantamount, and there's too much risk of failure to not
Right.
plan for that. And so I think giving yourself another year, provided Get Insured agrees to that, obviously, I think puts you in a better position for long-term success. And then we can discuss as part of that, because we would have more time to develop that RFP, what we can do in the next solicitation to better position us the next time we're in this position.
Yeah. So you're saying extend for 1 year, right?
That's my suggestion. I believe that's enough time. If there is reason that we believe it would take longer than that, I would be open to that conversation. But based off my experience in similar projects, I think a year is enough time because we're not just talking about a year from today. We're talking about a year from your current contract expiration, which is actually a little over a year from where we sit right now. And so
Providing they
ultimately
agree
that's
to it, right?
right. Providing they agree to that, we'd be talking about the next 2
Mhm.
enrollment periods rather than just 1. So we'd be looking at a implementation for a new vendor or this vendor under a new contract in mid 2026 rather than mid 2025. But obviously we would be able to do that sooner potentially and give the vendor a longer runway for implementation if we delay by a year. And when they have more time, that gives them the ability to plan better and potentially could decrease the cost of that implementation, because that allows you need a certain number of hours and you can have 8 people for 6 weeks or 16 people for 3 weeks. And the more time you have, the easier it is to do it with a, more committed, but potentially smaller team, which would save the state money. And so there is value to us in taking our time.
Yeah. So I guess, are we violating a rule or a law? Is there any reason why this is I mean, I think this is well thought out and I agree with what you're saying. It seemed like it was a big problem when we asked for it a few months ago. So why isn't it a big problem now? I guess I'm trying to understand why when we wanted it a few months ago, it was an absolute no. And now everyone is okay with it. But
So
I mean, do you
at
understand
a
what
basic level, there's not a law. There
okay.
is a regulation, and then there is policy within the state administrative manual.
Okay.
And so the regulation is NAC 333150, which gives me, as the purchasing administrator, the ability to decide whether the state can award a contract without competition. And when we are extending a contract beyond its original period, that is awarding a contract without competition.
Okay.
And
That's
then
what I
we
need.
have written policies beyond that in SAM, and that's State Administrative Manual Section 0310, which covers contract extension. And so when an agency wants to extend a contract, generally they have to come to the purchasing administrator in advance of negotiating with the vendor and request that approval from me. The Silver State Health Insurance Exchange has not done that formally yet, but
Okay.
Russell and I have had that conversation. But as Russell said, that happened this morning and your meeting was today. So the calendar dictates what we do sometimes. And so because we couldn't put that in writing beforehand so that Russell could bring that approved document to you, I'm here instead.
Okay.
And so
And we
I
appreciate that.
personally, as administrator of the purchasing division, have the authority to decide when it is potentially appropriate for us to go outside of our normal procurement rules
Okay.
because of the needs of a particular situation. And so
Gotcha.
in my personal opinion, 2 months ago, an extension for this contract was not justified because there had not been efforts by the agency towards attempting a new procurement. And so we couldn't necessarily justify, oh, we're not going to have time to do this because we hadn't really started. And so we couldn't really say we don't have time because we hadn't committed to actually doing it. Now we started, right? As of that meeting, we started in earnest and we hit some roadblocks collectively. And in doing that, that now changes the actual circumstances because now we're in a position where we recognize the path in front of us. And it's not just, we believe there might be something in the forest over there. It's, we're 400 feet into the forest and we saw a bear.
Yeah.
And now we actually need to react to the bear before we can continue exploring the forest. And so and that's a really weird metaphor that I just made up, but I think it demonstrates what I'm talking about.
I understand.
Sort of.
Well, and you know, I mean, let's not lose sight of the fact that it's the experience of the consumer that we are trying to protect. And
exactly.
So that comes first and foremost. So, okay. So I understand that. I am not, I don't operate in that space. So I'm hoping Jonathan or Stacy, you guys could weigh in a little just to maybe provide some perspective as well.
I was just gonna say, Valerie, I support the extension like we asked for last time, just given the risk to the state and to the consumers if we're transitioning to new vendors. I think it's always good when you have technology involved. So I support this extension and think it's probably the right thing to do. I agree with Gideon. I think the closer we get, the more nervous I think we all are. So I'm glad that there's a plan today in front of us to extend this at least a year. The only thing I would ask is if the negotiations take longer than 3 to 4 months to get an extension, that we consider even an additional 6 months because it does take time. And my guess is this RFP may need to be rewritten and other things need to happen. I don't know. I just want to make sure we all have enough time and we're not, you know, scurrying at the last minute to fix it.
Yep.
My question is, are there any concerns that Get Insured will not extend on their part, and do we need to have a contingency plan in place?
Gideon Davis, for the record, there's always a concern that the possibility that the vendor is not interested in continuing. I don't think it's a huge concern in this particular case, but you're right that it's not something we can rule out. Obviously, in situations where a public board is involved, it's a little more difficult because we're having this discussion at a public meeting. And if I was talking to a using agency that does not report directly to the board, this would be a conversation between me and their director privately in their office. And so get insured in a way has a little bit of leg up, because if they're watching this meeting right now, they now know that we're going to come to them and ask for a year extension. However, I believe Get Insured intends to continue in this marketplace, both potentially trying to continue to earn Nevada's business and in other states. And so I don't personally believe it would benefit them as a company to walk away from Nevada rather than extend.
Yeah.
I think it benefits both of us potentially to extend, not for the same reasons, but I think it is something that could be mutually beneficial.
Is there a reason you didn't talk to them before the meeting today?
As Russell said, this conversation between purchasing and the health insurance exchange regarding exactly how we should proceed occurred this morning. But also, from my perspective, the board needs to be involved in that decision, because you guys, just as you have to approve a contract award, a contract extension is an award. And so,
Yeah, well, we can't deliberate today and we can't take any action today as a board, obviously.
Right.
So,
and so had we not had this meeting already scheduled for today, it's possible that what was presented to the board would be different than it is right now. But you were expecting an update on the RFP process, and this is part of the update on the RFP process. And so this discussion had to happen because of the calendar. And so in a normal circumstance, it's possible that Russell would have come to me. I would have approved the authority to extend, and he would have brought that to you, or brought that and Get Insured to you together. But there's not a requirement with regard to which order that necessarily has to happen in. But with regard to the direction of the contract, that ultimately has to be a board decision. Informing you of it now helps prepare you for that action item that would occur at your next meeting in February.
okay. So we actually have until, we won't deliberate it. We won't be in a position to approve anything till February. Is that okay? We're okay with that?
Ultimately, that's your decision. Because your current contract doesn't expire until the end of next year,
Oh,
you
that's
have
right.
some buffer
Yes,
time,
you're
right?
right.
Because we're not talking about the
I
expiration.
kept
We're talking
thinking it
about
expired at the end
right.
of this year.
Well,
Okay.
and that's the
Yeah.
thing that is unique about this, is because we have to plan for the entire plan year.
Mhm.
In many contracts, we're having this conversation when it expires in, March. But for you guys, it's not actually expiring, I think, until January of next year, or January of 2026, by what I mean by that. And so for that purpose, yes, if we came to the February meeting, and at the February meeting, you guys approved the amendment, Russell's team would then be able to submit that to the Board of Examiners, and they would be able to consider that based off your February meeting schedule. That would get to them in the deadline in March for the April agenda. And so your amendment would be on the April agenda. Obviously, if you, as the board, wanted to move more quickly than that, you could schedule another meeting before that to take action on the item. But from my perspective, I don't think that's necessary, but it's an option to you.
Okay. I assume, Russell, you'll let us know if it becomes more important that we meet prior to February on this.
Absolutely. I think Gideon has done an excellent job of kind of laying out what the next steps are. We have to approach this incrementally. I think the first step is a conversation with Get Insured, just to establish the kind of the parameters within which we can approach a possible contract extension. And we certainly will keep the board apprised. And as Gideon mentioned, certainly the prospect of an ad hoc board meeting, perhaps within the month of January, is absolutely something we can accommodate. If it seems like that makes sense with respect to the overall timeline. But in my opinion, I don't think that there's a significant difference between, if we were to move up the board's review and potential approval of a contract extension by a month, that might mean that we could, present at the March Board of Examiners meeting rather than April. I'm not sure that would buy us anything, though, in terms of contingency planning.
Okay. So we'll follow your lead on that, Russell. If you need us to meet sooner, then just let us know. Otherwise, we'll plan on voting in the February board meeting on that.
Well, I'm grateful for your understanding, and grateful especially to you, Gideon, for your generous time that you and your team have put into this effort thus far. Certainly, this is not the way that I wanted this process to go. We have unfortunately kept throwing curveball after curveball estate purchasing, and they've done a commendable job of kind of rolling with the punches and providing us with our best options at any given juncture. We collectively have invested hundreds of hours into this process over the last several months. I do believe we have, an outstanding, very well-defined scope of work. And in particular, most of the work that we've done has been involved with exploring the various contingencies that might be associated with a potential vendor change, just to make sure that we're covering every single one of the bases. The most recent one of those changes, it was in relation to that recent discussion with CMS, which again was a huge curveball at the last possible minute. But we're very grateful for the understanding, and we do at least have a robust document in place, which we can further refine in the coming months to set us up for success next year.
All right. Yes, thank you very much, Gideon. We appreciate you being with us. It's very helpful.
Thank you very much. I am going to step off. If you guys need me, Russell can reach out and I can hop back on, but I think you're moving on to other topics and don't need me anymore. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Gideon.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any more questions on that RFP? I think I'm comfortable now. If anyone else has any questions, let's ask real quick and then we'll let Russell move on. Okay. Thanks, Russell.
My pleasure. Moving on to an update regarding our tribal partnership program. In recent months, the Exchange's tribal partnership efforts have been focused on deepening our collaborative partnerships with Nevada's tribes. We recently proposed a variety of communication and outreach activities to Director Stacy Montooth at the Nevada Department of Native American Affairs, or the DNAA, with the goal of authentically representing Native Americans in Nevada through compelling imagery in our Nevada Health Link marketing materials. Our suggestions included partnering with a skilled Native American photographer who understands tribal communities and their culture to capture professional quality photo and video assets at community events which are meaningful to Nevada's tribes. In addition to using these assets in Nevada Health Link's promotional materials, the tribes would maintain the rights to all images taken for use in their own promotional materials. Sponsoring community events to create a mutually beneficial partnership that enhances these events while promoting awareness of health coverage options available through Nevada Health Link, and partnering with members of Nevada's tribes to translate our fact sheets, resource guides, and future publications into their native languages. To ensure that these materials are accessible to all community members, we are committed to covering the costs associated with these translation services. These suggestions were met with a favorable response, and as a result of this collaboration, SSHIX was presented with the opportunity to sponsor the Nevada's Tribes Day Legislative Lunch on February 11th. This event will feature a presentation from the Exchange, and we will have a navigator booth staffed at the event with resource guides available. In the lead up to the luncheon, the Exchange will collaborate with the DNAA team on social media posts to promote awareness of the event. We are hopeful that this event is the first of many such collaborations in 2025 and beyond. I will pause again to address any questions or comments from the board.
Is this something that you do in conjunction with our marketing people, or is this separate?
This is an Exchange-led initiative. So I'm assuming you're referring to our marketing vendor, the Abbey Agency.
Yes.
This is more of a homegrown project of ours, and we consider this to be an extension of the tribal partnership program that we've reported on in recent board meetings. Thus far, those efforts have been focused on the Tribal Exchange Representative Certification Program, for instance, training and certifying, tribal members to offer enrollment assistance in tribal health clinics throughout the state. We've also developed an aggregated billing workflow to allow for a single monthly payment that covers multiple premiums that might be sponsored by a given tribe. And we've also been working closely with insurance carriers over the last year and a half to offer policy support to tribes who might be experiencing difficulties getting claims processed in accordance with their particular set of benefits under the Affordable Care Act. These recent efforts are intended to focus on collaboration, interagency collaboration in particular with other state agencies who have a common interest in serving these communities and these populations. So this is a recent effort that was spearheaded by our communications director, Katie Charlson. And she and Tiffany Davis, our existing tribal liaison, have done wonderful work establishing these contacts, listening, learning about what needs we might be able to help serve. And I really commend their efforts. I think this is one of the most rewarding aspects of our activities over the last year or so.
Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome. If there are no other comments or questions, I'll move on to the next section, which is an update on automatic voter registration. The Exchange's Information Systems Manager has been working diligently in recent weeks to finalize the Exchange's implementation of the automatic voter registration reporting requirements defined in NRS Chapter 293. And that was a result of the Assembly Bill 432 in the 2021 legislative session. Successful testing of the electronic reporting service was conducted during the week of December 9th. The Exchange anticipates that this system will be online in time to satisfy the statutory implementation deadline of January 1st, 2025. And just to provide a bit more context, this process will entail the reporting of qualifying Nevada Health Inc. applicants to the Nevada Secretary of State on a weekly basis, except in the 2 weeks prior to an election, in which case reporting will be provided on a daily basis. And the Exchange has developed a solution which is hosted entirely on state of Nevada computing infrastructure, and no direct vendor technology support is required, other than the continued ability for the Exchange to access marketplace applicant data through an online reporting tool, which is a contractually required service. So I know we've mentioned this a couple other times previously this year. Just wanted to give a status update and let the board know that we are on track for a successful implementation in January.
Thanks.
And again, I'll pause for questions or comments. All right, we're getting towards the end of the update here, but I did want to provide an update regarding the policy for vision carrier partnerships, which was requested by the board, if not for the first time during our October meeting, then perhaps prior. But Mr. Kumar had requested at the end of the October meeting that the Exchange attempt to produce a draft policy for vision carrier partnerships. And so I wanted to address that request here. When the Exchange team met recently to discuss the development of a formal policy governing prospective partnerships with vision carriers, we realized quickly that even developing a high-level outline of a policy would require the Exchange to assume a number of decisions, which we felt should be left to the board of directors. These decisions would in turn require action at a future board meeting. So rather than attempting to produce a draft policy which will be submitted for the board's review and which might be subject to changes as a result of that review, we are proposing instead to administer a framework within which the board can discuss and vote on what we consider to be the critical decision points. In hindsight, I acknowledge that this proposal might have been better presented as a for possible action agenda item at today's meeting, but given the lack of certainty that I expressed during the October board meeting regarding the Exchange's ability to produce a draft policy by this date, along with the demands that this year's OEP have placed on Exchange staff, I hope that the board will consider this proposal to constitute a good faith effort to move this project forward in a meaningful and inclusive way. As always, I welcome any comments or feedback from individual board members following today's meeting. Phase 1 of our proposal would be for the board to consider the following questions as a for possible action agenda item during the February 18th, 2025 board meeting. On Monday, February 3rd, the Exchange would contact the board members via email to solicit any additional questions that should be considered by the board, with a response deadline of Friday, February 7th. And the questions that we are proposing for the board to consider are: what shall be the term of a partnership agreement, The exchange proposes that 1 year, starting in November and continuing through the November of the next year, would ensure that new partnerships were in place prior to the start of OEP. We are proposing that 1 year should be the minimum term, but the board might consider a longer term in relation to the administrative requirements of the review and approval process. The next question we're proposing is, how shall the application process for a partnership be administered? The exchange proposes that a formal application and review process, similar to a request for proposal, would allow for a robust and balanced review and vetting process. The implementation of a standardized application form would allow for the solicitation of comparable information across multiple applicants, while also allowing for the inclusion of contractually binding language, which would streamline the execution of any approved partnerships. The next question is, shall the application require performance metrics to be provided by prospective partners? If so, which metrics should be required? The next question is, how shall the application, review, and approval timeline be structured? The exchange proposes that an application window of July to August would allow for applications to be distributed to board members for review during September, after which the board could vote on their approvals during the October board meeting. This timeline would allow for new partnership agreements to be executed and for the Nevada Health Inc. website to be updated prior to the start of OEP on November 1st. Next question that we are proposing is, should approved vision carrier partners be required to provide periodic reporting to the exchange? If so, what data should be reported? For instance, confirmed enrollments and vision coverage following a Nevada Health Inc. referral, customer satisfaction metrics, etc. The next question we are proposing is, should there be a maximum limit to the number of concurrent vision partnerships in place at one time? The exchange is not aware of any other state-based marketplace with more than 3 vision carrier partnerships. Should a hosting fee for approved vision carrier partners be charged by the exchange? The hosting fees associated with historical partnership agreements have been negligible with respect to the exchange's operating budget, and the absence of hosting fees for future partnerships would not present a risk to the exchange's revenue. Phase 2 of our proposal would begin after the board votes on these questions during the February board meeting. The exchange would draft a formal policy, as well as any supporting documentation that would be required by the approved methodology, e.g. an application form, which would be submitted to the board for review prior to the June 2025 board meeting. The June board meeting would then include a 4 possible action agenda item to either approve the documentation as submitted or modify / amend the proposed documentation in accordance with the board's preferences. So clearly we've offered some pretty clear opinions on our part, but again, as we sat down to actually write this thing up, we realized very quickly that there were a number of forks in the road, which we thought ought to be addressed by the board before we actually, potentially put a lot of time and resources into developing a draft document. So I would welcome any questions or comments from the board, but just ask you to please keep in mind that this is not a for possible agenda item at this time. This is just our proposal, doing our best to set hopefully positive expectations for the February board meeting.
Jonathan, I would want your opinion on how deep we go on something like this. I mean, I work with a lot of vision carriers, but it's on a group level. What are your thoughts about how deep we need to go on this, providing that it's not, I don't think it's required by ACA law, so we've got some leeway there, right?
Yeah, I think again, it's something that whether it's dental or vision, I think it's something that people look for or want that coverage, and if the exchange can facilitate that in a way that makes it easy for the consumer, I think that's great in terms of the mechanics and how we go about that. I think this whole thing came about because there is kind of an agreement already, or something that already happens that directs folks to be able to purchase this, and this is just kind of expanding on that and maybe giving the consumers a little bit more choice. But yeah, I think it's worthy of full discussion by the board, and happy to do a final review of the questions for the RFP and get the collective voice from the board if there are any additional questions that should be added to it.
Yeah, I mean, a traditional RFP, I think makes sense. I think where I struggle is, you know, do we charge a fee for this? It's so small. You know, the premiums are so small. You know, how much information do we need back from them? You know, do we want customer, it's customer service is important. You know, but how much information do we want back from this thing?
Russell, is this something that they would just get information from and they purchased it directly from a vision provider, vision carrier?
The idea would be that, so, and for context, that there is, as you mentioned, an existing partnership in place with a vision carrier called VSP. And we actually heard from them during the October board meeting when the board considered the continuation of the existing agreement that we have in place. My biggest takeaway from that meeting was that additional competition, if you will, was desirable, and that the board was in favor of developing a formal process, perhaps an application process, through which multiple vision carriers would have an opportunity to essentially compete for what, in my mind, amounts to a tacit endorsement of that carrier's services. So the goal would be to perhaps come up with maybe 2 concurrent partnerships at a minimum to provide a kind of a baseline of competition and variety in the marketplace. But just to clarify, Chair Clark is exactly right. This is not required by the Affordable Care Act, nor does the Nevada Health Marketplace sell vision plans. We don't anticipate that requirement anytime in the future. These would be references and links essentially hosted on our website that would refer consumers out to the websites of these individual vision carriers for enrollment in their vision plans. So right now we have a vision page on our website, and the only carrier on there is VSP. If we were to implement some type of application process that we could advertise, to other vision carriers, perhaps other carriers that have partnered with state exchanges other than the Nevada exchange, we would likely end up with a number of applications, after which we could review and vet those applications and determine which carriers we thought were the best fit for a Nevada Health partnership. And one key distinction between a traditional RFP, and I was hesitant to use that terminology in this report, but it was mentioned by at least one board member, I think during our October meeting, as a suggested, possibility for the structure of the application process. This wouldn't be a procurement in the sense that we would be, procuring a vendor that we would then pay a fee to. In fact, historically, vision carriers have actually paid fees to the exchanges that have hosted these referral links. So we would be looking to implement an application process where no money might change hands whatsoever, although the possibility of a fee paid to the exchange by vision carriers is certainly on the table, and that is how our current partnership with VSP works. But that was there were concerns expressed by a number of board members going all the way back to our June meeting about perhaps ethical concerns related to that fee. So I just wanted to include that as part of the discussion. Our main focus and our main priority, though, is to develop a transparent and balanced process, which will essentially give a fair shake to any vision carriers that are interested in entering the space and pursuing a similar partnership to what we have in place with VSP. Because, at least my perspective on the history of that partnership is that it was, I would say, proprietary in nature, in the sense that VSP sought out this partnership, and the exchange has not, to the best of my knowledge, ever actively solicited, bids from insurance carriers seeking similar partnerships.
Yeah. I mean, I think the goal is really just to enhance the shopping experience of the consumer, and I think if we had at least 2 or 3 vision options, it does enhance the experience. It may keep, the vision vendors more competitively priced. I think that's really the goal, is just to provide that shopping experience that is, optimal to the consumer.
Well, and to be clear, like the exchange has no role in customer service as it relates to these plans, no role in the administration of these plans. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And in fact, that was a topic of discussion going back to our June board meeting. And that was the specific consideration that I had in mind when I included the question about whether or not we might want to require any performance data or metrics to be submitted to the exchange as part of this, as part of this process. We could, for instance, require vision carriers to provide us with periodic, perhaps quarterly updates regarding consumer complaints, customer satisfaction levels, that sort of thing, in order to increase our oversight in an area that has traditionally been kind of hands-off as far as exchange's role is concerned. So if that sounds okay, I think we can easily put a proposal together for the February meeting. As a for possible action agenda item, certainly the board would be able to make motions. There would be some flexibility involved with the ensuing discussion, and it sounds to me like it might be helpful for us to include in that agenda item an overview of the existing structure of our website with respect to that link, just so that everyone's on the same page about here's what the page looks like, here's what the link looks like. If we had 2 vision carriers instead of 1, here's what that might look like. I think that might be helpful context prior to the nuts and bolts discussion about what that process might look like. After which, and I would guess that it's likely that the board might be aligned with a number of our suggestions that I mentioned a few moments ago. Those were taken directly from my notes from the October board meeting, so I didn't mean, I wasn't anticipating any surprises or curveballs there. But if we can achieve a fair degree of alignment in the February board meeting, that would give us confidence to move forward internally with actually drafting a formal policy. We'll make it look like our other policies and procedures. We'll put it on agency letterhead, and we could also develop a draft application form that would solicit all the information that the board agrees ought to be part of the application process. We would not necessarily have to develop the evaluation criteria until we meet again at the June meeting. But if desired, the exchange would be more than happy to put together a proposed, evaluation methodology for further vetting at the June meeting. And that would be kind of based upon where we land with the actual policy and the application form if one is desired.
I think that makes sense myself.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the board's consideration. Again, we're just trying to keep this one moving forward. We know that there was interest from a number of different board members. Did want to just see if there were any other comments, questions, concerns about our proposed approach to moving this vision carrier partnership process forward before I move on to our final agenda item. All right, thanks everyone. The last section is short and sweet, and it's in regard to personnel updates. In November, the exchange filled 2 key vacancies on its policy team. In October, I reported that the 2 senior positions on our policy team were vacant. Those have both been filled. One of these vacancies was filled with an existing staff member. The exchange's plan certification manager was promoted to our policy and compliance manager position. And although this change did not result in a net increase to agency staffing levels, we traded one vacancy for another. This promotion allowed the exchange to retain the significant program expertise garnered by one of its highest performing staff members. And we are always extremely happy when we're able to promote high performing personnel internally. As of the date of this report, the exchange has 2 remaining vacancies, both of which are anticipated to be filled in January 2025. One of those vacancies is obviously the plan certification position, from which we hired our new policy and compliance manager. And the other position is an administrative assistant position within our Henderson office. So again, we're hopeful that those vacancies will be filled in January, and a recruitment for the plan certification position opened last week. So we are actively working to fill that position. That concludes the executive director's report. I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions or comments from the board about the personnel updates or any other section of the report.
Great job. Thanks, Russell.
All right. Thank you, Chair Clark. Thank you, members of the board. Very grateful for your time.
Right. So moving on, we will skip item number 5. And we won't take action, but is there any discussion? Well, no, I think we will skip item number 6 because that was Mr. Kumar's idea and he's not here today, so we'll skip item number 6. And item number 7, topics, dates, times, and agenda items for future meetings. Does anyone have any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I think just we identified several things in the meeting today to be discussed at our upcoming board meeting in February. I think that's a good list for us to work from. I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. And I apologize for backtracking, but just very briefly, when we do this thing for the vision, Russell, I assume dental either has this in place or maybe we should just bundle dental in under, if we're creating policy and procedure, do we have that for dental? Or should we just kind of make sure, since it's also not really part of ACA requirements, do we kind of have similar policy and procedure for that, or is there a different thought on dental?
Dental carriers are actually treated in essentially the same manner as health carriers with respect
Okay.
to ACA regulations. So we do have
Okay.
5 dental carriers. They are subject to exactly the same annual compliance and plan certification requirements. So, while the nature of the coverage is very different, from a regulatory standpoint, we treat them and they're required to meet exactly the same requirements as health carriers.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, that makes that my now everything is clear in my head. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Seeing no other agenda items or topics, we'll move on to public comment.
That would be me, Madam Chair, happy to help facilitate the public comments at this time. And I'll go ahead and start with our Carson City Conference Room. Cassie, do we have anybody in our physical location who would like to make public comment at this time?
This is Cassie Fuentes for the record. There is no public comment here in the Carson City office.
Thank you for that confirmation. And then going online onto Zoom, if we have any attendees who would like to provide a public comment, you may raise your electronic hand feature on Zoom now, and Caitlin will call your name and you may unmute yourself for public comment. Caitlin, do you see anybody raising their hand or in chat who would like to make public comment at this time?
I'm Brigham for the record. No, Tiffany, I'm not seeing anything in the chat or any hands raised at this time.
Thank you for that confirmation. And then if anybody has joined us on the phone lines, if you would like to make a public comment, you may unmute yourself at this time and provide public comments. Not hearing anything for the phone lines. Madam Chair, I believe there are no further public comments at this time.
All right. Thank you so much, Tiffany. And that brings us to our adjournment. I wish you all very happy holidays, happy new year. Look forward to seeing you in 2025.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
You as
you.
well.
Bye-bye.